Oh. One firework. The only way to obtain an electric vehicle would be forward pushing or forward.
So that's what they do.
Okay, recording in progress. Yep.
I'd like to call to order the finance committee meeting. Roll call, please.
Reedy,
Present.
Cosgray,
Present.
Phillips.
We also have in attendance, council members Randy McCreary, Debbie Schaffner, Rick Foreman, Mayor Rick Ellis, Solicitor Mr. Becko, Matthew Neuheiser, VA, and Mr. Bedrow, the village finance. What is your title? Fiscal officer. Yay. Can I have the approval of the November 11th minutes, please?
Yeah, I read the minutes on it.
I'm sorry.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Can we have, we have one visitor. Would you like to speak, Mr. Bidler?
No.
Okay. Our goals for 2024 spending within the 2024 appropriations. We seem to be doing that lately. And new business, reviews of monthly financials. Mr. Bidler.
Okay, so last month we ended up with an ending overall balance of $2,103,407.13 between the UAN book balance and the bank balance of last month. Oh, we had since it was the end of the month of November and Thanksgiving was Thursday and Friday, we weren't open, so there was a couple transactions, as you see in the notes there, that posted to the bank that hadn't made the books yet. It was basically, so that's all. You know, when we got back Monday, it was posted. So that's what that's what that adjustment is down there. Reconciliation notes. We don't have too many of those very often. Outstanding checks last month, 66,650. And that's pretty much it for the reconciliation.
Any questions about reconciliation?
Moving on to the check register last month, it was $371,177 worth of checks. Nothing out of the ordinary, except no, I'm on the payment listing. Is there any questions on the payment listing? I'm looking for BK Layer 30. That was the first payment of the Gordon Street project. I was looking for oddball last month. And of course, Spires Paving for our portion of the paving. Warwood Armature, you'll see a couple big checks there. Eli had to have some pumps worked on. One of them was a brand new pump, so that was the $28,000 one. Sewer pumps are expensive.
Yes, they are.
So, I don't think Neptune equipment, that was for meters. So, anyway, any questions on the check register? Any more questions? That's all I can find, or out of the ordinary. Moving on to the metrics, Star High interest was $2,300 last month. As you can see, it's starting to go down a little bit. I hope it don't go down too much, but it's starting to go down a little bit. Rita last month, $169,000. That shocked me. We've never received that kind of allotment in the month of November before, and I inquired with Rita about that, and I haven't. And the reason why is because of the Newark Group. Is that Greif? Is is that the Newark Group? Is that what they're, okay.
Yes.
Where's that? There it is. Basically, they received $90,000 in payments, $56,000 towards 2023's estimate, $626,000. Another payment towards 2020, and then $8,800 for the balance due on 2022. So from Greif. So yeah, they're making up on back taxes is basically what it is. They still have penalties outstanding of approximately $3,200, but
That's a big debt.
that's a big dent. And then basically, based on that, our overall collections for the year, we are now almost 2% ahead of last year right now. So that's a good thing. As you can see, appropriation, we should be 92.3%, and everybody's below that. And then be on the revenue side. So any questions on?
Any questions on the metrics?
And then, of course, the appropriations. There's your appropriation for the general fund. As you can see, Tim has spent all of his money in capital outlay this year on his projects. He's done for the year. Same with Scott. Even though we have another payment, but we had to pay that. We're paying that on the general fund. Overall, for all the funds, we're about 75% for the year. So we're doing good.
Okay, any questions on the appropriations? All right, temporary budget.
Can we get approval of the reports?
Will be financial reports, please.
Sorry.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, temporary budget update.
Yeah. I sent you the updated budget for the first 3 months of next year. I don't know what happened, but I missed it on the council's agenda last month, so it's up for a second reading tonight. Unless you guys want to have a meeting scheduled between now and the end of the year, it needs to be passed in emergency tonight. I'm sorry. I don't know why I omitted it from last month's, the last 2 weeks, last meeting. I don't know how I missed it. Huh? Well, no, we're not going. You're not going to be in the red because this is just a temporary budget to get us through.
So this is for the first.
Yeah, this is just a temporary. We haven't even started. I haven't even given you the full budget yet.
This is the first quarter.
The first 3 months, yes.
Okay.
That just gets us, hopefully gets us through the first. The only thing is what's hanging. I may have to make one modification to this between now and the end of the year. We received the second pay request for the Gordon Street project, and I don't know if that project's finished.
It is not.
So there's some. I may have to include some numbers for the capital projects fund if that's okay. It's just
That'll be carryover.
I understand that, but yeah, I may have to. Well, that's true. That's true. I never thought about that. Yeah, that's right. That's true. That's just carryover. Right.
Make it finished for you. That's all we're trying to do.
Yeah, I don't have to make that because I don't know about next year's PWC project. I was thinking about that today and I thought, man, I had to,
Yeah,
but that'll be a carryover.
that money set aside.
Yeah, it's a carryover.
Okay.
But anyway.
You're suggesting that we send that to council.
But it's already to council. I'm just saying, I'm asking council to pass it as an emergency because I omitted.
Waiver reading. Yes.
Okay. Reserve balance memorandum. Can I get to read that?
Yes.
Everybody understand it?
Sure.
Okay.
So, to paraphrase, basically,
Basically,
we're required to have a carryover sufficient for 1/12 of the expenses on the initial budget, which means that we cannot allocate unencumbered funds to the new special, to the water project like we wanted to.
That's correct.
But after the budget's established, whatever money that there is, sort of available, then we can put that into the fund we already have for the water department, right?
Well,
We don't need to establish
it was
a whole
just,
nother fund.
the motion that was passed about a month ago was to take whatever the unencumbered balance was in the general fund and reserve it, not to transfer it, just to reserve it.
Yeah.
But I got thinking at the time, and I thought we could do it, and I double checked with the state auditor's office, and we cannot. I have to meet payroll. I have to pay utilities. I have to pay
Which is all laid out in the
all.
number, but I understand all this.
So basically, I either the motion that was passed a month ago needs to be undone or revised.
And we intend to revise it. So what would be appropriate language for the revision?
How are you going to revise it?
Yeah, how you gotta revise it?
Because
I mean,
the intent is anything that we have in the general fund that's not already in a budget.
Beyond what's necessary.
Yeah, beyond what's necessary, we want to put it into the water improvement fund that we've already had.
well, we're not. The money was never going anywhere. It was staying in the general fund. The motion was to take
This new-
this. The money was to whatever the unencumbered balance was in the general fund at the end of the year, whatever that number is. If it's 400,000, I was supposed to restrict or reserve that 400,000, not put it in a transfer to another fund. It wasn't a transfer. It was just
So
to
we need
reserve it.
abandon that motion.
Huh?
You know, abandon that motion.
Basically.
Okay, so we understand the intent, what we want to do. What we want to know, what's the best way to do that?
To undo the motion, just make a
Okay,
motion to undo the
We're
motion.
gonna have to create a new motion or during the budget negotiations, then you just
You can earmark some money
figure
there.
that out and you're like,
Yes.
right, that.
Yes.
That would be a more,
Or there's another, because the Ohio Revised Code does not allow us to create these reserve balance accounts in the general fund for villages. Why that is, I don't know. And I didn't think about that when it was passed, but I just wanted to call about it, so I did. And I got a response from the state auditor's office. I forwarded Jeff to type up a memorandum. Now, there is another avenue we can create. It's a capital projects fund in accordance with 5570513C. And you can call it the Market Street Waterline Fund or whatever you want to call it. And it basically what that is it's creating a fund to put money into that, but I would keep track of where that money came from the mainly from the general fund, because you can't use street money for that. And it accumulates resources over a certain period of time to use that money strictly for that particular.
and it's earmarked for that.
Yeah, it's be
project.
earmarked just for that project only. Now, the only question then becomes, how much money do you want to put in that fund every year? That's the only question. That's what you have to decide. But that's if you want to go that route. And if you want to go that route, I can start having Jeff prepare that legislation starting next year.
So let's have a discussion on it. I have two thoughts. I honestly, I don't see the need to create a new fund. Because we already have the water improvement fund,
You have a water improvement fund, yes,
and that can be used to,
to do the water line,
Water line,
but
right?
that's correct.
okay,
But there's only like 20-some thousand in that fund.
so,
And that's our intent.
right, that's the intent. So here's a scenario. Let's just say for the sake of argument, it's gonna cost $300,000 to lay that water.
Okay.
So we're gonna need to save up that much money for that project.
Okay,
We start putting money into the water improvement fund. And
You
then
can do
we
that.
have, something that can't wait, and it's got to be repaired now, and it sort of, depletes that fund. And so we're starting from scratch to the 300,000.
basically, yeah.
So the advantage of having an earmarked fund would be it just goes in there, just keeps accumulating. And if it takes 10 years to get there, and then it takes 10 years to get there, and then we do that project. or if we get grants, et cetera, however, but we have the matching grant fund in that fund ready for that project to write grants for and to initiate construction of that water. And that would leave alone the water improvement project for whatever comes along that needs fixed right away. And it's not going to take away from the water line project.
Right.
So, any ideas on should we create a main water line fund or just continue to put what we can into the water improvement fund that we already have?
I think we should, because if, like you said, if something comes up and we keep depleting it, we're starting from square one again, right?
Right. Plus, if we're going to write a grant, it's a matching grant. You already have the matching grant fund set aside earmarked for that project, which I think would be beneficial for us when writing the grant.
That's the biggest thing, is to have that money for if we do write a grant. The only problem, it's like last night, a water line broke and you had to go there and fix it. I just worry about, we just gotta have enough money to fix the things that we're fixing now.
We still do. We do that all the time.
Yeah.
It's in our general.
Well, I just think having a fund just for that is the best way to do it, don't you?
Pretty much.
Yeah. I mean,
He would have to create his own, and he would have to
right.
say how much they're doing that.
Well, it also would show.
I don't make that decision. You guys make that decision. How
It would
about
also show that we were making an effort to put money away for that big of a project.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. It would help us when we're writing grants.
now? You can only this fund can only be. Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong. You're talking about creating a capital project fund, or are you just talking about putting the money in the improvement fund?
Well, that's what we're trying to determine what's the best course of action.
No, that's two different things.
I think creating a separate fund dedicated to that project
So that would be the
has
capital.
an advantage.
That's the capital projects fund. That's not the water improvement.
I know, that's
But
exactly.
he said,
what I'm
let's
saying.
make a capital, let's make it a fund for that particular, the Market Street water project, yeah.
Okay.
Like, we already have the fund for the water project, but like, in
Yeah.
a scenario, of something more urgent comes up, it's gonna wipe that
Right,
fund
it
out
will,
versus
yeah.
if we keep putting a little bit in, like a stone savings account for that project.
Yeah, and you can accumulate resources into that. But correct me if I'm wrong. You have it in here, Jeff. I think you can keep it for up to 10 years. 10 years.
Well, we-
After 10 years, you either have to re-up that or that fund, or the money gets paid back to the fund.
I mean, kind of hoping we get them.
I hope we get it done, yeah.
But if we're 10 days, 20 days from here, you're telling me we don't know how much money we have available to put in to fund that.
Not yet.
How's that possible?
It would just be a ballpark guess. I still got payroll to pay. I got another payroll to do. I've got
I know,
utilities
it's
paid.
Pretty consistent from week to week. It isn't as though payroll one week is $10,000 and the next week is $80,000. We're very consistent on that. I mean, you don't have to be to the penny, but I'm saying that
I had to.
surely we know how much money we're going to spend in the next 20 days.
Sure. And part of that legislation, is there any like, whenever part of our tap fees and stuff go into the water improvement fund, that's already been established, that's in legislation. When we establish this new fund, part of the legislation, could we say take 5% of those tap fees and put it in that fund?
Well, I'd say 10%.
Whatever percent.
Yeah.
But what are you trying to say? And that we're setting aside money for the water
Yeah.
improvement for water
I
projects.
agree with that.
We're thinking a percentage,
you wanna
whatever,
do-
tap fee, whatever, for that work specifically.
But we can't really afford that.
Well, 10%, I mean, we're gonna get it. I think we can afford 10%. I mean, just thinking if it should be more. I'm
Well,
like 20.
Yeah, whatever, but we've got a reserve fund set aside, earmarked for that, because obviously it's a priority. It hasn't been done for since 1950, when those cast iron things were put in there.
Cast iron and lead.
Well, most of the repairs we do are on that line, and those, central line.
It's the biggest central line,
Right.
according to them, yeah.
So it's,
So if something blows on that line, are you gonna take it out of that capital fund, or you take it out?
No, we leave the capital
We
fund
fix it all
alone.
the time without.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like,
right,
Yeah.
right.
It's not like we don't.
We want to
do
replace that
We do
whole
every year.
thing.
I know.
But I think that's a good idea. Plus, if in the future on these tap fees, we took 10% of it, we get a big bulk check, we take 10% of that, and we stick it in this capital fund, then we can show whoever we're making money for, that look, we're already setting money aside for this. Here's where we're at with this. Now, again, it's gonna take us a couple years to get that money built back up, but
What happens though if when our water modeling survey that V3 is going to be doing for us,
right.
what happens if they come back and they say, yeah, this needs to be replaced, but here's 4 critical areas with development.
Well, they're gonna say that anyway.
We still have the other.
Yeah, we still have,
Yes,
we
that's
still have
right.
water proof fund, and they're gonna, I can guarantee you, they're gonna say what you just said anyway.
Yeah, and it's
There's-
not,
There's other projects that are bigger, or not bigger, but that are older and worse
there
than
are
Market
smaller
Street.
lines that are older.
But this, if we had the money to do this, all the other stuff would fall into place much
Also, I
quicker.
think sorry, I didn't think there's an advantage to creating its own capital fund. Because we're elected officials, and what if we're all not here in another 5 years, but that fund is here
Yes.
for the purpose. And the people are around the table are gonna say, hey, yeah, this needs done, hey, look.
Continuity.
Yeah, exactly, that provides the next generation of
So,
years of.
So I think we're in agreement on that. Ladies, are you in agreement with that too, to dump money in that? I mean, let's read it.
Brian,
Hmm?
how do you feel about this?
I think it's a good tool to put money aside for that project.
Okay, how
But
much
it's,
do you think that?
I
I mean, how much? You're taking it out of the normal water.
We're actually not.
Right.
you're
We're
not,
taking.
you can't take it out of the
We're not
water
No,
fund.
no, 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 that's not what I mean. The monies that are coming in, so much from the tap fees go to the water.
But right now, that's the only thing that funds it.
Okay,
Right.
But
so how much?
in the upcoming years, there's a lot more coming in than
Yes.
has been previous.
And,
Whether we like it or not, it's a fact.
and
I agree, I just don't want us to deplete that, fixing things. And, do we do 5%, do we do 10%, 20%? What do we afford to do out of that fund? Not out of that fund, but.
I'd say at the minimum 10%.
I don't know what the answer is. I mean, the general fund pays for a lot of stuff. It pays for the police department. It pays for cemetery, the parks, zoning, the mayor's court, your office, the mayor's office, my office.
What's that have to do with what we're talking about tonight? Because what we're talking about is the money that we didn't spend last year.
I know.
And what we're talking about is the upcoming money on tap. Those two topics have nothing to do with what you're talking about right now.
Oh, I know. But you're asking me what's the dollar amount? I
Then
mean,
we're gonna have
that
in
I-
order to do that.
it changes daily. I mean, if I had to guess right now, you're looking at maybe a 430,000 carryover in the general fund, if I had to guess. But I don't know.
We created a budget, after this temporary budget's passed, and we created a budget, and during the budget negotiations, that will let us know how much money. we'll
Yeah,
have
I mean,
available
after
for
the
this
first
fund.
year, I'll know a lot more what the
Is that right?
carryover. Huh? What's that?
That's right, like, after we pass this temporary budget, we get into what's going on next year. We're gonna create a permanent budget, and during the budget negotiations, we'll know.
But in January, surely we know what.
Well, yeah, we would know by then. Yeah.
Okay, so
And I think that's what.
I'm not sure we need to
Saying.
zero in on the dollar figure today. There's gonna come a day when we can't.
Well, I think he's thinking what I was thinking is that you guys are saying, let's do this before the end of the year. And I think we should wait until,
It starts the first of the year is what I'm
Well,
thinking.
we, council has to pass, I have to prepare an ordinance. Council has to pass the ordinance. And the information I'll need for the ordinance would be the source of the money, which sounds like it's the general fund.
That's the general, it's the only fund that can.
The amount of money to be accumulated and the period of time over which the money, the amount is to be accumulated.
well, if
We can extend it out 10 years.
Yeah, I would
But
say-
at the end of that 10-year period, from the date that the ordinance is passed, it's got to be spent or it reverts back to automatically to.
But you could renew that ordinance. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hopefully, we've done before.
But what we
Yeah.
need to identify is how much money can be taken from the general fund to fund this for fiscal year.
And
2024.
so I can keep
For fiscal
operation.
year 2024.
Yeah, right.
So if you were to take your monthly expenses out of the general fund,
It's 100,000 a month.
100,000 a month, there you go. And you think you're gonna have 400,000. So what you're telling me is we have about 300,000 we could probably put in there and
But-
still have a little wiggle room.
Yes, but I caution the full 300,000. The
Yeah.
reason why that is because we're in the middle of a park grant that we have to fund for Johnson Park
Yeah.
starting next year.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be $100,000 right off the bat.
Yep.
So you're looking at less than 300,000.
Even if it's 150,000, it's something we put in there to get it started. So that within 3 years, maybe we'll have enough.
And no matter what,
Do
it
it.
isn't really money that's gone. It's just still sitting.
It's still
on the
sitting
balance.
there, you're right, yeah.
Oh, so let's just say 150 and we do 15% of the
I
tax.
think we gotta push ourselves harder.
Okay.
I honestly do.
I think we'll have a better idea once we do the, budget negotiations.
So we do this in January then, first meeting? Is that what we're saying?
Well, I won't know what the final actual carryover is. I won't know that until the end of January.
So
Because-
we'll pass the temporary budget today.
Mhm.
And then we'll think about this and you can tell us, okay,
This is the
$100,000
exact,
a year, we can throw in that account to build up for the water project. Okay, so that's where we're at right now. We need to just wait until some point. The first thing in January.
Right. Yeah.
Although it's kind of- Okay,
then we gotta come up with a percentage of the tax fee money that.
correct.
With that, that'll stay in,
No, we'll throw something in there and then what's the percentage of the tap fees that we wanna,
so we'll keep this legislation on the agenda
Yes.
for finance.
Yes.
yes,
Okay,
yes,
great.
Okay,
yes.
I'm good.
So it gives us some lead time and so we can think it through and get it done right.
Yeah.
And not,
No, we want, but I wanna lean toward the more we put away, the better it's gonna look for us to get more money
in the grants.
in the grants or whatever. Cause we never had anything for that. You know.
Okay.
And then as I say, we get a grant down the road. I mean, council can rescind the ordinance and the money would just revert back,
Sure.
so.
Yeah.
Good deal. All right.
I would ask under new business before that concludes, a motion for a brief executive session to discuss the personnel issue.
Okay,
And the mayor's offered for the visitors to just camp out.
Or Matt,
His
or
office.
might be better if Matt's office.
All
Or
right.
Matt's office, whatever.
Okay.
Well, you don't have to leave just yet. They haven't made the motion. If you want to be preemptive, go ahead.
We'll do it real quick, go ahead.
I don't have any snacks in my office. That's right.
Oh, wait, wait.
Motion.
myself.
Retreat.
Okay, so we're back at 6:30.
Yeah. You don't need to know. Probably we don't reflect in the minutes.
I've already.
Okay, thank you very much. And do you have anything else to discuss in finance? We need to move along, and the next meeting is scheduled for the second Monday in January 13th at 6 o'clock. This is your reorganization. Okay.
All right.
Hold on. Before you get started.
Discussion.
We're done. Next up. Okay, I'm ready.
Call the meeting to order.
Schaffner. Foreman. Curry.
Present.
Do I have a motion for November 11th? Oh, I'm sorry. Let me back. Also present is Fiscal Officer Brian Bittler, VA Matt, Village Solicitor Jeffrey McFico, Mayor Ellis, and do I have a motion to approve the November 11th meeting? Yes. Very need to approve the roll call?
Curry.
Yes.
Foreman. Schaffner.
Yes. Right, visitors. We have, we have you on business, do you want to wait till then?
Get everyone signed in.
She's here for council. She's here for council.
So 2024 goals, your valley is still tabled, and we're still waiting to hear, I guess, about the equipment that you.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm supposed to sell old business. So I would like to just say a couple things about this. I'm just, before we get into this whole thing, I just want to present some background. I brought up home occupation about a year ago, and when I mentioned that I thought we had an ordinance stating that home occupations had to be registered, no one at the council meeting seemed to know anything about what I was talking about. So I asked the then village administrator, Brian Holbrook, to try to find something, and he was not able to. I sought to look into it at that point by myself, and I believe in the zoning code, I found a notation that there was a section related to home occupations. But when I went to that section of the zoning code, it was missing. So I contacted Brian Bittler, and he was able to find the section. It outlines the specific guidelines that must be in place before a home business can be approved. So there's currently no ordinance to require home businesses to register, but we have home occupation requirements in the zoning code. So because of this inconsistency, we sent ordinance to zoning to make registration for home occupations mandatory, but that ordinance was rejected by the zoning board. So where we currently are is residents are not required to register their home business, but if they want to, they can register and pay a fee. That just seems a little bit silly and inconsistent to me. I am not advocating for or against mandatory registration. I just think that our policies should be mesh consistently with our zoning code. So if we don't want to require residents to register their business, I think the section in the zoning code should be eliminated. So I know that last time there was some confusion. It sounded like there was confusion by the zoning board as to what they were actually approving.
I think we discussed it afterwards, and I'm understanding that we want to give it more teeth, so maybe a fine schedule, something that there would be fines established, but it is in here and it details what home businesses are, but there is not a fine, there's not a consequence essentially. So,
but how about the requirement to register?
well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that the village essentially businesses are supposed to sign here, they're supposed to register with the village. But that's why I'm saying I'm in agreement to the extent that I think that we should give it some more teeth. In other words, there are additional fines or what have you if they do not.
Again, I just find this inconsistent because we don't have any ordinance saying that you have to register. So how do we find somebody if they don't register?
I'm confused. It is in here. We read it.
An ordinance?
There is an ordinance in there.
There is information in here. I know that we had it, Holly specifically read it at our meeting. And that was why we came to the determination at that point. Nothing, ultimately, we felt like it was redundant. What is your goal? You want to make sure that home businesses.
The problem I've run into, I think many residents have run into time and time again, is that, and Terry used to say it all the time, enforcement of ordinances is complaint driven. So what we find ourselves is we're stuck in the middle of neighbors, squabbling with neighbors, and going to this village administrator and complaining. And so the only time these ordinances are actually ever enforced is when one neighbor complains about the other neighbor, and all the rest are pretty much overlooked or ignored. And so it becomes this selective enforcement thing. And
That was the mechanism.
if it was going to be across the board and always be followed, I'd be fine with it. But time and time again, these types of ordinances become very combative and weaponized in this town. So that's why I'm against it, because there's a whole bunch of businesses in town and they're all going to be affected. And if we're not going to affect all of them, then I think we should leave all of them alone.
So you are not in favor of making people register for business?
Not really, no. Because if we put teeth on it, it's going to turn into this complaint-driven thing with teeth. That 80% are doing it and nobody says anything, and 20% are called out by their neighbors and subject to this ordinance.
In all fairness, though, that a lot of the code is complaint driven.
That's my point.
So tall grass, junk in the yard. If a neighbor can put up with it, they don't complain, they don't get.
And this will become yet another weapon for
That's
one
true.
neighbor to pick on the other.
That is true.
So what do we want to do with the guidelines then for home business? And you're saying that no home businesses are allowed.
I didn't say that.
Well, if there is no,
Here's my thing. I don't think we have the manpower or the energy to say who's a home business and who's not a home business. If you're selling antiques to your house online, is that a business? Are you registered with it? Are you registered with the business? If I'm selling, I don't think we can go after it. Maybe whatever. I don't know where you draw the line there. I feel like there's just so many more important issues to deal with
well, I'm sorry about that.
than that.
But then what are we going to do about the guidelines and the zoning code? That's what I'm asking.
Most of the things I saw had to do with extra parking, extra cars,
Right.
extra
Yeah,
people.
but we're not allowing
Things that are an invasion of your neighbor's privacy or their taste.
Let's say that somebody invades my house. So who am I gonna sit there and watch and count the cars and do that? I don't know how we police that, is what I'm saying.
But we keep going back to that, and I just kind of want to shovel that away and say, what are we going to do with the zoning code that says, here are the things you do for home business when we don't have an ordinance that says you have to register. So he's saying he doesn't want even to have, to allow home businesses then.
No, he didn't say, he's
Well,
just
if
saying.
you don't have an ordinance. Okay, so you're going to allow them, but they don't have to register. Okay, is that what you're saying?
We have a situation where they are suggested to register, but we don't have teeth in it. So I don't know what we do to change that.
Well, that's exactly what I can. And that's exactly the point.
If I can interject, I do think the ordinance needs cleaned up because I found another definition of home occupations that I forwarded to the administrator that is a little different. It's shorter than the earlier definition that he located. Also, a lot of communities, based on my research, will, and I'm not suggesting that we need to do this, but they'll assess a fee, an application fee for filing their application to have the home business registered. And they'll also assess penalties. Usually it's a fine if somebody fails to register. And then they're escalated if somebody registers and they're found to be in violation of the ordinance because they're not doing things that are permitted by the ordinance. So there is some cleanup. And I also discussed with Brian and Matt, it's frustrating. I shared Debbie's sentiments on this because it's frustrating. The current zoning code that's available online is not easy to navigate. It jumps from one section to another. It jumps from one page to another. It falls back on an earlier section or an earlier page. That's in the process of being cleaned up, but it's not extremely user friendly. So if the administration's having difficulty finding certain provisions, my concern is that the general public is probably having the same concerns, the same issue.
I'm in support of that, and that's what I was trying to say. We had kind of had this roundabout conversation.
So we just need to, I need you and you to figure out, let's come up with a code and come up with a system and then present it to council. Okay. And then we'll do it that way. That way, what you're saying, then we clean it up. Yeah. There's some teeth and fines and
I can
stuff.
do that.
Okay.
Just as a rough draft.
Okay, I'm gonna ask the question again. If we're not requiring registration, how do we find somebody if they don't register?
Well, I think an argument can be made that it's implicit that they register because the very first paragraph of that code section says if a home occupation complies with the following criteria, it shall be permitted as an accessory use in residential districts. Well, how does it get approval to be an accessory use? Typically, that's done by somebody filing an application and it then it's reviewed by the zoning administrator and they check the boxes and say, okay, yeah, let's see what there is to comply. So even though there's not strict language saying a home occupation must register, I think it's implicit in our code that they're obligated to do that.
But I say we come up with something in writing with fines and stuff like that, present it to council and we'll put it in and we'll change it if we have to. Okay. But then there's something in plain writing. Do I think that we need to be the home business police? I do not. I'm not gonna make him go if there's a, but the only way you're gonna know that is if there is a complaint. So, and if we set it up with
If there
something.
are complaints, then if they will be investigated.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to do that, yeah.
Next is tree commission.
Little Stevie. Come on, Steve, give us some happiness tonight, will you?
Oh, boy.
Trees are happy. Yeah.
Just have a few dozen pages in there. Yes, verbatim. Yeah, I'd like the minutes to reflect the verbatim transcript. Back on behalf of the tree commission to talk a little bit about code revisions that we're recommending. And for those of you who don't know me, I just want to let you know I have done this exact kind of work for almost 40 years, so I'm not a practitioner here to turn this up.
No, I don't think that at all.
So with that, we're talking about codified ordinance 1272, the general development standards, and specifically the landscape portion. So the little summary I typed up, I don't know if everybody got a copy of that, but I'll just kind of touch on those bullet points. In 127208, we're not recommending any changes about submitting landscape plans. But the question we're asking is it council's intent to enforce that? Because I'm not aware that it's ever been enforced for residential development. We have reviewed plans for commercial development. But there's been a number of new homes built as infill over the last 5 years that we never saw in the landscape plans for. And this section of code appears to me, in my absolute lack of legal expertise, to say that it's required for residential development too. So we'll just be looking for clarification on that for Matt's sake as much as anything.
Right.
That if Matt wants our help with landscape plan review, we're happy to. And then moving on to section C, the street tree requirements. The change we're recommending there basically says either we will mark where street trees are planted, or you will mark them and get our approval before you dig, because we don't want them planted over gas valves and water boxes and downspout drains and that kind of stuff. And quote unquote professional landscapers often ignore those details. And so we just want to make sure people aren't creating future problems for residents or the village. Section 2, following that, we're basically widening the minimum spaces. The current code allows planting of some fairly large trees in some pretty tiny spaces, which again is just an indication of future infrastructure damage. So we're recommending that those minimum spaces be a little larger for small, medium, and large category trees. We're also recommending in the following section 3 that 1.5 inches be the minimum caliper instead of 2. And we're making several changes in the code to be consistent in how we define caliper. And we're using the landscape standard, which is not what's reflected in the code right now. 1.5 inch caliper trees are much more readily available, easier to transplant with a better survival rate. And 5 years later, they have started growing even faster. And you probably won't be able to tell the difference between that and something that was planted at a larger size. Let's see, there's already language about the site visibility, so we're just quoting that. Section 6, we're suggesting street trees should be located no less than 10 feet from fire hydrants, street lights, etc. The current language is the same, except it says shall. And the right of way can be a complicated place. And sometimes you may only have 8 or 9 feet to work with. And we didn't want to technically, make something forbidden and it's still perfectly workable. 10 would still be our goal. Section 7, I'll summarize by just saying that a lot of people love the look of perfectly matched trees up and down a street, but that is an invitation to insect and disease problems, and it is impossible to maintain over time. In a new subdivision, it will all look very uniform for perhaps 20 to 30 years, but then eventually things split, things die, you get a mix of sizes and different trees anyway. And the current professional recommendation is to diversify, not randomly, but to diversify to provide more protection against insects and diseases and to better reflect the space you have. You may not be able to put large trees all the way down a given block because you've got overhead electric lines crossing somewhere, or other factors such as that. The tree lawn width may change as you go down the street. So we're just recommending that we discourage monoculture and encourage more biodiversity. We're also adding there and several other places, per the solicitor's suggestion, the language about street easements, since we do have some streets and roads that are not dedicated to public right of way. Section 11, we're adding a minimum clearance goal over streets as well as, sorry. Section 11 is where we are just adding a little bit of clarification to the section that already says you can't do things in the right of way that make it impossible for trees to grow there unless you check with the village. And the biggest culprit there is residents dumping gravel in the right of way to create additional parking, which makes it pretty difficult to do anything else in the right of way. And then we changed the dimensions a little bit in the tree well section for the DMU districts, if that is still a thing. Just to give a little more square footage to those places where it's already challenging to grow a tree. The buffer screens we're suggesting be made mandatory between residential development and adjacent non-residential development. Right now it says you should, but we're suggesting that should be mandatory.
So I got a question for you on that, Steve. Yes, sir. So it's interesting you bring that up. So there's going to be possibly some retirement condos built here in the village, and some of those might be butted up against homes. Is that so? When you say screening, would the condominiums be the screening?
Well, they're still a residential zoning.
Okay, they are. I just I want to make sure. Yeah.
So no, the only example I can give you today in the village that comes to mind is the new Shoppers.
Okay.
They planted a buffer all the way around their west side because that abuts existing residential development. And they have a parking lot on the west side. They don't have a parking lot on the east side, so they did not have to put screening in there.
It was just a question.
Yeah. All right, then in parking lot islands, again, just changing the caliber to 1.5 inches and adding a section that says, don't plant the trees in your islands right next to your light poles or other infrastructure. And we see that happen a lot because the people looking at the landscape sheet of the plans don't cross-reference the electrical sheet or the storm sewer sheet, and you end up with islands that are kind of silly looking with everything piled on top of one another. We also are taking out any language allowing evergreens and shrubs in those islands because they are dangerous. You want canopy that it's above motorists' line of sight, not bushes that are creating obstructions to people's line of sight as they're maneuvering through a parking lot. Landscape materials, again, just changing the caliper minimum, some formatting stuff, and then adding a little bit of language to provide flexibility to the zoning administrator for rain gardens and detention basins and other landscape installations beyond Kentucky bluegrass. And then finally, just tweaking the language about substitutions. There's already a requirement in the code that required landscaping be replaced within the guise, which is great. But we may need to entertain requests for substitutions about that.
I would say on this, the best thing to do is for you to meet with Steve and go over all these and then make the changes that we need. And what he's recommending is, we need to do that.
Well, this is why it's here. That's the changes. If they're okay with the changes, they have to approve it and move it up to Jeff.
Well, I think at our last meeting, we gave you the actual code with cross-outs and underlines and all that.
I'm gonna speed this up a little bit. This is really thorough. Appreciate the clarification.
Yes.
I'll move to approve the changes.
You know, you're gonna sponsor.
Yes.
And just as a reminder, we'll need legislation. So it will come instruct me to prepare legislation.
And Foreman seconded.
Yeah.
Okay. McCreary,
Yes.
Foreman, Shauna.
All right,
Thank you all.
Thanks, Steve. Yep.
all right, anybody have any new business? All right, next meeting will be held second Monday in January 13th, 6:30, or immediately following finance. Got a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Motion to aye, or if you have to wait, you have to wait.
as far as the.
You already did that.
Oh, you
Okay,
were.
that's
already
what
did
you
that.
said.
That's what you
Yeah,
just
I've
did.
got it in my notes.
I want to try to get it down. I just want
Because I'm having the same problem with my computer. And I just spoke on the paper because and it's computer errors, you know.
I've been doing okay now.
Well, I'm just gonna do that. I'm just
Oh,
gonna do that. Just
And I think that's what
No, I'm not saying that at all, but I'm telling you that I.
Yeah. Will be a fee and a fine. So if they are.
Running airways down. It is.
So how do you say? We already have the. Not going.
Yeah.
But I think that's God. Fee.
Okay.
That's the Lord's Prayer. Lord in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Brian, can I get a roll call, please?
Cosgray.
Present.
Foreman.
Present.
McCreary.
Present.
Phillips. Reedy.
Here.
Southner.
Can I get a motion for the approval of the minutes from November 25th?
Which minute? Which minute? Public hearing first?
Makes a motion, we approve the minutes of public hearing as written.
Okay, seconds.
Just any discussion on that? Can you get a roll call, please?
Foreman.
Yes.
McCreary.
Yes.
Cosgray.
Yes.
Was you here for the last?
Was that here?
No, you
He
were.
wasn't here. Abstaining. All right, so we get
All right,
approval
Reedy.
on the approval. of the
Reedy.
council meeting.
No, I'm not done. Reedy. Phillips.
Yes.
Schaffner.
We'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the November 25th regular meeting.
3 seconds.
Get a roll call.
Foreman.
Yes.
Reedy.
Yes.
Cosgray. Yes. McCreary.
Yes.
Phillips.
Yes.
Schaffner.
Yes.
Okay. For the approval of the agenda this evening, you have the list of visitors that would like to speak.
We need to approve the agenda first.
Do we have any
Sorry.
modifications?
I don't believe there's any modifications.
Okay, before we make a motion, we approve the agenda as presented.
30 seconds.
Roll call.
Foreman.
Yes.
Reedy.
Yes.
Cosgray. Now you can answer.
Okay. Have a list of-
McCreary.
Yes.
Phillips.
Yes.
Schaffner.
Yes.
We have a list of visitors that would like to speak.
Yes.
Okay.
Melissa O'Connor. Is it Connor? I got mine up here. I don't know if that's working or not, but I got it ready.
What's the time on that?
4 minutes to each person.
They have to vote on that. It's 5 minutes with polls, and I
Oh,
brought
is
this
it
up.
5 minutes?
It's 5.
It is.
It's 5 minutes per council.
Okay. All right.
Thank you for allowing me to sign this. David versus Goliath. I'm Melissa Connor, and I represent our group called Citizens for Fairfields. All we have are our voices, and this is why we have come to you asking for a letter, specifically asking for our signing board to do. If this project goes through, Walnut Township will lose 1,550 acres that the township will no longer have any say over what happens in that acreage. It will be controlled by the Ohio Power Siting Board. You need only drive to Chillicothe to see what a fine job the Ohio Power Siting Board has done there. It's extremely important, not just for our township, but for the future of our entire community. And we would ask that you would look at what we're dealing with and envision yourself in those same roles and how you cope with that situation. We don't have federal money to throw around. Oh yeah, that's our money. We don't have that opportunity. Letter, expressing your voices, using the voices along with ours, into the Ohio Power Siting Board, where this project does not fit in our community. We've done all we can to let you know why it doesn't, showing the conflicts that we have in the binder that we presented to you. We've been able to show you how this is on prime farmland. The developer will tell you that now they're thinking of putting sheep on the project. They'll also tell you, if you read the fine print in their addendum to their application, that they will do so if it is profitable. You might have noticed as you drive around Fairfield County, you don't see a whole lot of big sheep farms. There's a reason for that. We have prime farmland here, and it's much more profitable to grow corn and soybeans and wheat on that prime farmland. So we're merely asking for your support. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. And I appreciate the opportunity to address you this evening. Can I answer any questions? I assume that at some point you have made a discussion, you've had discussion amongst yourselves as to whether or not you are in favor of writing such a letter. It does not have to be a unanimous letter. Those of you who choose to abstain from signing it, will do so. I have explained to you, I believe in the past, where there have been villages where we have gotten letters from the mayor, from the council, as well as from the administrator. So it can be divided up with however you're most comfortable. Thank you very much. I hope that you will let me know very soon as to whether or not you choose to do so. Letters must be received by the Ohio Power Siting Board no later than next Friday in order to be taken into account by the Ohio Power Siting Board by the staff.
This Friday or next Saturday?
I'm sorry, Friday the 20th.
Okay.
We have put a self-imposed deadline of the 13th.
Okay.
So that we might be able to follow up for anybody that we thought we had letters from that hadn't arrived there yet. Thank you very much.
Justin George?
Well, I was questioning mark.
Yeah, I know.
wanted to see what they said first.
Okay, so
Just let them go first.
okay.
If I want to.
Nicholas, I'm sorry, I can't. Yeah, how you spell that? See? Huh?
Lucania.
Oh, okay. Are you Jen?
I am.
LYNC.
All right. Good evening. My name is Nick Lucania. The other party reference in the room. I'm a lead developer for the Eastern Continental Solar Project in Fairfield County. With me tonight, I have my colleague Jen Lynch. I just want to take a couple minutes of your time to discuss the project. But first and foremost, thank you for allowing us to take some time to discuss the project and some of the factual details with you. If you follow along on the actual inside of the packet itself, there's just kind of a little slideshow that we put together. First slide on here is just a quick meet the team. Only thing I wanted to point out here is our local representative, Lori Feakin. If you had an opportunity to meet with her, quite literally in your back parking lot is where our local project office is located. That's where Lori spends a couple of days a week to answer any questions from the local community. Quick slide on the next one. On the next page, rather, is just an EDF Renewables overview, who we are as a company. Kind of the big takeaway here is that we're a developer, owner, and operator of renewable energy projects across the US. So we do everything from where we quite literally going to design and build this project through decommissioning and the entire life cycle, which is about 50 years in between that. The next slide here on the bottom of the page is just some key project information if you're not already aware of it. So I'll just run through this pretty quickly. Target project size, so it's 220 megawatts, and relying that in just layman's speak, it's equivalent of about 42,000 average American homes that it powers. Project jurisdiction, as I mentioned, it falls within Fairfield County, within Walnut Township specifically. And a big one, kind of a comment that was made prior to this, is the total project acreage land. There was a comment made that it's 1,550 acres, which is comprised of leased land in the project area. Just a quick note here is that we are not a public utility. I get this question pretty often from the community. Therefore, we cannot exercise any eminent domain. So we don't just come into the community and say, hey, this is where we're building our project. These are all agreements that have been entered into through private land agreements with members of this community. And then once constructed, here's the caveat that I wanted to make. Generally, these projects are about 4 to 5 acres per megawatt. So what that translates to here is about 900 to 1,000 acres, if not substantially less once the project is fully designed. But we're just not at that point in the project stage where we know that right now. Jen will cover the last 2 points on the slide here, just about community involvement and project information, but just kind of wanted to make the note that we've been around for about the last 4 years with the goal about educating about solar and the project itself. And then the last thing I want to cover before I turn it over to Jen is just what's important for the village, right? What is the impact on the village of Baltimore? 3 kind of big takeaways here is, what does this permitting process look like? So as Ohio Power Siting Board administers, it's a state-run process. And it seeks input from the county as well as the townships that are impacted. And there are significant must adhere to over the course of its life through decommissioning. Proximity to the project, this does not abut Baltimore, the village of Baltimore. It's roughly about 4.5 miles away from the nearest edge of the project itself. And probably most importantly for the village itself is the economic impact. So if there is any direct benefit for shared services with Fairfield County or Walnut Township, i.e. police departments, schools, social services, kind of anything that falls under that umbrella, there'll be an expected $1.98 million annually coming from the project in tax revenue, as well as hundreds of jobs that will be created for the broader Fairfield County. So I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions. I can stay after the meeting, no worries. Jen, I can turn over to you for just a couple minutes.
Sure, great. Thank you. Good to be here. Thanks for allowing us to speak. You've probably, I know you've heard about the project. You may have seen us in the community. We've partnered with a number of organizations over the last 4 years. And that's kind of a dual purpose. Number one, to educate and to listen, to make sure that we're tabling or in the community so people can ask questions, which I think has been extremely helpful. But also, you know, we've reached out to various organizations, whether it be Habitat for Humanity, United Way, the Baltimore Food Pantry, Meals on Wheels, et cetera, to be a good corporate community partner, to make sure that we are investing in the community and making sure that we're there when there's needs. So that's been a really fulfilling opportunity for me personally, being in the community for the last few years. Actively volunteering and again, just, you know, being there when called upon. So one of the, within the community involvement, this is on the last page here, just has some of the key highlights. I know that the sheep grazing was mentioned. This is something that the EDF is very familiar with. They have sheep grazing on other projects around actually the world. And it has been a really incredible opportunity for sheep grazers. Typically, it is very hard to find land that is economical for them to graze on. The number of sheep grazers who have reached out to Nick and myself has been incredible. Another project that I'm working on where we have active sheep grazing in Madison County. There's a few others being proposed. There is a large community in Ohio. I do a lot of work in agriculture as well. Okay, great. So thank you. Happy to answer any questions. And as Nick said, we're happy to stick around. Thanks.
Sure. What is, I've asked this now, third parties, what's the percentage of the prime farmland involved?
In the project itself, generally make up, so the layers that are provided by USDA don't identify by parcel. What they make it just kind of general. So we can show you a map, but based off of a worst case, even if the entire project was prime farmland, which it is not, it's roughly about a quarter to a third of a percent of the total Fairfield County line. So
That's in CAD.
Okay. Citizens for Fairfield has been here several times now, and one of the things that they've mentioned is that they've asked for a list of chemicals and that you've refused to provide it. Can you just like maybe elaborate on that?
Sure, is that in panel composition, I assume? So I've never been asked a question about providing a list of chemicals. One can certainly be provided. We haven't selected a panel manufacturer that we'll procure from yet. That's something that typically happens a little bit later in the project. But generally speaking, all panels are safe. One thing to mind, the US EPA as well as the Ohio EPA would likely not allow these projects to continue if they pose some health risk to the general community, contaminate any type of groundwater, et cetera. So one of the voting members on the Ohio Power Siting Board is a member from the Ohio EPA. So one other thing I'd point to for you to reference, it's an impartial source and it doesn't come from the words of media from my mouth. The county commissioners commissioned an external research entity to research this exact matter. I'm more than happy to forward you a copy of it. The results came back very conclusive that there's no impact from these rays, any components of this infrastructure that poses a threat to anything human health safety related.
And then the final question, the other, actually we didn't hear it from you. I've heard it just in the community, concerned that panels are installed and it causes rain runoff to the adjoining farms, which, causes flooding or any other kind of problems with that farm. What recourse does the adjoining farm have?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's something that we hear very often in the community. As I mentioned earlier, I think I made the mention, it's in the slide. If I didn't mention it, the Ohio Power Siting Board, or just broadly speaking, Ohio, is the most regulated, or probably second most regulated state for renewable energy projects and how they're cited. And with that being said, there are a variety of conditions that are placed on projects. One of them being the management of exactly what you just mentioned. So there's something called a SWIP that we enter into, a stormwater pollution prevention plan that addresses exactly that. When we design these projects before pre-construction, I mentioned advanced engineering prior to this. They run what's called what we get 100-year worst case storm scenario for rainfall, and quite literally design the project based off of that. So EDF, as I mentioned, one of the biggest developers in the U.S. and in the world. We have a constructed project in Madison County. When they ran that analysis, what they deemed appropriate for the community was to fully remove and replace all drain tiles, repair and upgrade mains, and dig out additional culverts. I mean, that's just one example of how we deal with those type of issues. So aside from how we deal with it, I guess your question is more directly what happens if it does happen.
I guess it's either or. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, and there's reports.
Yep.
So for any project with the Power Siting Board, whether you're a transmission line, AP transmission line, or any other power generation source, there is a process. So if there were to be an adjoining landowner or a community that wanted to file a complaint, there's a process. And I will add to Nick's comment about Madison County and the Foxborough project. It is, I would say, kind of tip of the spear from an industry standpoint, that they systematically retiled the entire project. So that when that project is decommissioned, they will know exactly where those tiles are, so that whatever those landowners choose to do with that land prior to that project, they know exactly where the tiles are. And actually, the Madison County engineer has invited EDF to participate in a number of different discussions with the County Engineers Association to talk about this issue. So,
and with the power siting, one last comment too, there's also a governance department as well. So if those things are happening, there's certainly recourse around for any affected landowners to talk or bring a voice to the state. The state is monitoring multiple projects during operation.
Is there a website where you can go to see how much is federally subsidized and how much of it's actually funded by state electricity?
You can check out the provisions of the IRA that was passed about 2.5 years ago, the Inflation Reduction Act, that provides information on ITC or PTC, some tax credits that renewable energy developers.
This is from about this project specifically?
No, generally speaking, what's available to
Where
you.
can we go to see about this project specifically? How much of this is just grant money and federal funding versus actual?
So to this point, nothing's been funded federally, it's all private investment dollars.
Everything you're doing is private investment.
Up to this point,
Yeah,
absolutely.
no.
Up to this point?
Correct. Yep. Up to this point, correct. There won't be any information because until we make stronger full financial commitments to the project, we won't be structuring any of those type of financial deals. But what we can take advantage of is the IRA. So ITC and PTC, it's called tax credits that these projects can take advantage of and apply for, much like any other energy project.
So I have two questions. My first question is the project that you're talking about up the road, how much of that electricity is going to go back to Licking County and Fairfield County?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I get all the time as well. So EDF does not actually broker the power once it hits the grid. However, based on just a sheer scientific response to your question, energy loses kind of value transmission as it moves down transmission lines. So anyone who brokers that power, i.e. a utility like AEP, is incentivized to keep it local and serve any local load entities. So the city of Columbus, Pickerington, Lancaster, wherever it may be, these bigger centers, and it kind of spans out there from the generation.
So nobody around that lives around there is going to benefit from electric.
Oh, no. From the generation site, it then pools outward from there.
You mentioned something about jobs. How many people from Licking County or Fairfield County will be working installing those?
I'm sorry, you said what?
How many people from Licking County or Fairfield County will actually be installing those?
Yeah, no, another good question. So up to 500, I think it's 504 is the exact number.
Those are people that are being locally hired.
Yeah, so one thing through the tax revenue, it's an abatement program. It's called the pilot payment lieu of taxes. If we enter into that, which majority of projects across the entire state of Ohio have once they reach that point, one of the tenets to meet that program is that 70% Ohio domicile labor workforce is required. I think at Fox Squirrel, our project in Madison County, at one point it was like 94% of them hired.
When you say local, you mean the people in that county?
So it can be across the state, right? But generally incentivized, and folks are coming from that area just due to the proximity of the project and the workforce. So,
and EDF signed a free trade agreement with IBW, the electrical workers, the laborers, LIUNA, and the operating engineers. So they will then source those folks. We do know that there are close to 500 IBW members in Fairfield County, 50 in Walnut Township, and LIUNA and operators also have a significant number. So it'll be.
But you can't tell me that electric that you're going to put over there is going to be used in Fairfield or Licking County, correct?
I can't tell you that for certain. No, as a utility.
The same way that your lights here are coming from a power plant. It's, once it goes on the grid. But based on what Nick was just saying about line loss, electrons are used closest to the load.
And I think one thing to note too in this kind of broader conversation that Ohio is already importing up to 0.25% of its energy, and as coal is decommissioning at a quicker rate than additional capacity or loads being put into the state, that deficit's growing, right? So maybe 25% today, and if there's no backfill for that energy or capacity coming online or coming offline rather, that energy will continue to be imported from states outside of Ohio, maybe not even just surrounding states, it could be coming from further away.
I just find it odd that we would put, because this is creating and just to be totally frank, what they're doing out there has nothing to do with the village fault, as far as I'm concerned. It's not going to affect us. Do I feel bad for the people that are out there? I do. Only because this whole thing has created such a put neighbor against neighbor, and I think it's ridiculous that we're doing this, putting people against people. With that said, I also am a firm believer if you own something, you should be able to do what you want. So it's a catch-22 for me personally. But I just never seen anything that's created such havoc. Now, if you were going to put them solar panels, and 100% you could say, we're going to power all of Licking County, I might have a different opinion on that. But if the energy is coming from there and it's going to a different state or a different county, I still know that it's worth all that disruptiveness between the neighbors.
I can't personally say that it's going to be where it's going to go, but if there's a demand source by the generating facility, it will serve that load. It's again just kind of basic science. Again, we don't do that as EDF. We are not a power broker. We stop once it connects to the grid, but again, just based on science, it will stay. Especially when Ohio's importing energy, there's no incentive for it to go out of the state. If it was overproducing energy, that may be the case, and they'd supply neighboring states. States are kind of all connected without going into the nuanced detail through kind of like regional transmission operators or kind of multi-state entities who run the infrastructure. So it could get shipped somewhere else, but there's such a need in Ohio that it would stay locally. So.
I have a couple questions.
I'm sorry, did you have another question or was that?
So the first question I have, you mentioned that there are hundreds of jobs. So is that during the construction of such a development? And if so, then how many jobs once it's established and up and running in operation?
Yeah, good question. So the stats are on there. And additional information, I think the total economic analysis had 504 direct construction jobs. So solely just building the plant itself.
Right.
And then once operational direct jobs, minus anything that would come with the sheet grading commitment that Jen spoke to. I think it was 6 or 7 long-term operation.
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought we get at that. Okay. Another question. Sure. So, what's the most established site that we have in our region, and how long has it been?
Region meeting, like
let's say Ohio and surrounding states, Midwestern states. How about that?
Yeah, good question. Probably within the last, I'd say 5 to 6 years.
Okay, so they're pretty new. So of those, they're still up and running, and it would be interesting to see how efficient they are.
And at some point in time, I mentioned the Foxborough project a couple times.
I have family in Madison County,
County
and Pickwick County.
And more than happy to, anyone who's interested and wants to see a more working or functioning site.
Oh, I've driven by 22 there. So, and then how about, so are there any studies that you guys are aware of in terms of going from, we've taken farmland, it's operational, and then let's say they decide they no longer want to utilize the established site. How long does it take for land to recover in terms of then reestablishing the fertility of the land? Are there any studies out there?
Not to the extent in this large scale. Presumably the land will be able to return to in its original condition, if not better condition. The land's not being.
How could it be better condition? I'm curious.
Because the land's not being tilled, it's not being used.
So then soil erosion is not an issue. And there's nothing that's happening with the panels in relationship to the soil in terms of.
I mean, again, it hasn't been a long-term study, but.
That's kind of what I'm doing.
But I think with an implementation of that issue.
And I'm not against solar. It's just that I come from a large farming family. So, yeah, I just question like the impact on if it's the best.
There's been kind of like the original few projects that are now operational in Ohio. The conditions that were put on that land is very different than the conditions even from 3 years ago, 2 years ago, today, moving forward. We now have new rules in place that were heavily influenced by the Ohio Department of Agriculture, who is also a member of the Ohio Power Setting Board and others. So the industry worked very closely to figure out what are the right pollinators, regenerative grasses. Most, if not all, companies work with very sophisticated companies to develop that vegetative management plan both on the site and around the site. So in addition to the sheep grazing, there is an enormous amount of effort that's being put into how are those soils being treated while it's under operation of the project. And there's a few projects, and again, it's at some point would love to have you all out, but you can, when you're there, you can kind of see, the various vegetative mixes that are currently growing, and these are pretty new projects, so.
Thank you. You answered my question.
A question regarding the engineering safety in regards to fire prevention. Because of the transition from AC current to DC, you got to go through all the inverters and all that sort of stuff, and that's where fire hazard is most likely. Are your facilities engineered for access and fire safety and all that sort of stuff?
Absolutely. So it's about 24-foot wide access roads to accommodate any type of fire response that would come in the very unlikely event of a fire, right? I think the current quoting for frequency of fires is like 1 in every 100 megawatts installed capacity. So quite frankly, very less than 1% that it could occur. And if it does occur, there are emergency management response plans that are coordinated in conjunction with the county and local fire departments, EMS, et cetera. And I got to go back to this guy. And that's during construction as well as operations. All right, thanks for your time. Thank you.
I am.
Any other visitors like to speak?
Carl Elder, is it Elder?
Yeah, I'm Carl Elder, business owner in Walnut Township. And just a few things, we farm right next to where the Eastern Cottontail project will be, and we are worried about drainage. And one of the things, it's almost funny if it isn't sad. I hear your council arguing about zoning, but we aren't allowed to have any zoning with this project. The state takes control over all that, and there are 80 some homes that's going to be beside, in the middle of, next to, around, and many more houses just a short distance away. And this is, we think it's a travesty. Our children will have to get on school buses fighting with trucks. There'll be thousands of trucks hauling materials in and out and stone to build the roadways. And it's just not a good fit for our community. A lot of the other projects just have a handful of houses around. And I just am against this project. Thank you.
One more time, Justin, George.
My name's Justin. Hi, Justin. How we doing? Good. I have a farm next to this project. My farm will be bordered on both sides of it. We raise all natural beef. This sheep thing, that's cute. It ain't gonna be natural. My cows, stuff like that, are in pastures with not under solar panels, stuff like that. We don't know what's in the solar panels. We don't know. I wouldn't eat anything off that, what they're raised on. Wool growers is done. That you can't sell the wool. There is no place to sell.
Excuse me, I think we should.
All right, well, I have my 3 minutes. I'm going to talk.
You got 5 minutes.
5 minutes, but I'm going to talk here. But, you know, I'm raising 3 children in this community, and my family's from Baltimore. We went to Twin City. That's my grandpa. You know, that's butcher place. You know, we raised a lot of stuff. For them to come in and tell me they're going to put sheep under these things, they ain't gonna work. I mean, would you eat that? Would you eat a lamb that was raised underneath a solar panel?
I'm not hearing.
Well, I'm asking you a question. I'm just gonna ask you, would you do that, or would you eat something that I've raised?
I'm not answering questions.
Well, you asked me a question.
It's a public comment section.
All right, but I'm just saying, this is not gonna go well. I mean, it's just, they think that we can throw this stuff out there that, you know, we're going to graze sheep, we're going to do all this. Drive down to Yellowbug. See what that one looks like. Madison County, you know what that one looks like. Tell me that this is all positive. So that's all I got to say. I mean,
Thank you, Justin. Anybody else want to speak?
I have no one else on the list.
Okay. All right. Well, that's administration. Yeah. And listen, you guys, we're going to go to village business. You're welcome to stay, or you're welcome to leave. Whatever you feel comfortable with. Everything else we have to talk about is might be boring. That's all. So, all right. So village administration reports. First report is the mayor report. The only thing I was going to tell you is that Chief Police is not here tonight. He informed me that the 2 cars that we have are now in, and we will be outfitting them in the next 2 or 3. They will be here after the first year. They will be outfitted in January. He was able to hire somebody. We're 2 officers short. He was able to get 1 officer hired. The officer sworn in and is working. The only other thing that I have to report tonight is the project on the water project we just finished on Wood Street is almost done. There's about 40 foot of sidewalk. They're just waiting on the weather to get good so we can finish that project up and put that one to bed. That's about all I have to say.
And by the way, I just to let you know, if you look at the budget, I included the cars, the $29,000 payment in the budget, thinking. Yeah.
Well, we were hoping that they would be.
Yeah.
So, Okay, next, report is the village administrator.
Yeah, so I submitted my report along with the other documents last Friday. A couple things I just wanted to highlight. The mayor already focused on Golden Stream. Also, with the passage of the traffic pattern change on Walnut, Mulberry, and Mill, I know we passed that. I don't know if I dreamt that I passed the word along. I thought I'd passed the word along. I did not pass the word along. So we sent out letters early in November that we would be changing those patterns. We sent out letters to the residents that would be affected the most by it. Mid-November, told them that we would have it done mid-November, and then the miscommunication or the lack thereof. So we sent letters out to them late last week or today, informing them that that would be one of the first things we would do after the holidays. So we wanted to make sure that those residents knew what was going on. We continue to rotate the wells. Well 3 is back on right now. 4 and 5 are offline. The lead time for the gates that'll be coming in, they'll be coming in between the end of March and early April. And we also have a memorandum of understanding ready to present to Greif, and we'll be doing that next week. So just wanted to pass those things, highlight those things.
Next report, you're allowed to make one mistake, but you can't make another one.
I understand. I've already made 2. So.
Okay. Mr. Fiscal, I'm sure you gotta get your report.
Yeah, I don't have nothing else to add.
Okay. Mr. Solicitor, do you have anything?
Real briefly, no first readings on the agenda, 2 ordinances on for second reading, 1 on for a third, 2 tabled ordinances. That's all I have.
Yes, sir. So let's go to the village on the finance committee.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we had a meeting tonight. We approved all the financial reports. We need to pass the 25 temporary budget tonight, and we discussed the reserve balance information. And our next meeting is January 15th to 6 p.m.
For service.
Service is not meet this evening on our next meeting, 23rd.
Mr. Safety.
No, it's 27th. Oh, 27th of January.
Yeah, we changed it.
Mr. Safety.
Safety doesn't meet, we'll meet on the 27th.
And the rules committee.
We did meet tonight, discussed home occupations. I think Matt and Jeff will be working together on that. Next meeting is January 13th, 6:30, and we'll finance.
Wonderful. Public safety reports, as I said, the chief is not here. He is working this evening. And that's hence we're still short 1 officer. That's why he is not here. There's nothing to really report there. I guess the next question or the next report will be from Mr. Cosgrave, Fire Department.
Right, we met the 21st. We went over get ready to do the budget for the fire district, and we spoke about the solar panel as well. I asked the chiefs, the assistant chief about that, and like the gentleman had explained, they have plans, like emergency plans with the county,
right,
and all the response folks, and each individual solar project is going to have its own response plan. There's no kind of rule book to go by because the state fire marshal hasn't ready yet.
Gotcha.
And our next meeting, we're going to have a meeting this Wednesday to go over the budget for the fire district.
Okay. All right, village committee and commission, planning and zoning commission. We don't have a meeting because we don't have anything really on the agenda for this month. Tree commission, we were lucky enough to have Steve here to go over some stuff that we redoing some of the ordinances. Records commission, anything for that? No. Debbie, Bicentennial commission.
I still need to talk about
Oh, so I did talk to Kenny. First meeting back in January, we're going to do that.
Okay.
So I've got to get him the stuff between now and then, and he's like, we'll figure that out. So yes.
And then we do have a little problem, and we had talked a while back about insurance, and Jeff had suggested that we just add a rider to insurance policy and then since found out that we cannot do it. So I don't know, I'm worried that we may have to cancel the Heritage Tour. I'm gonna go around and talk to people.
Could cancel it.
Well, because they're gonna have to take the risk of liability on.
Yeah, we don't want that.
And I guess what I am gonna ask Jeff is, when I approach these people, I'm assuming that if we go ahead with this, that we would have to have them sign a waiver.
Yes, I would recommend that.
That's really not it. There's a rumor going around that, Sands Committee is meeting tonight. But we're not 100% sure that's correct.
All right, well, we'll go into motions.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion. Can we do it, everyone?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to make a motion authorizing the village solicitor to be a factual witness and present a factual summary to the Fairfield County Parks District regarding the discussion involving the Park District's purchase of the Wagner Reserve, the Heron Rookery, and waiving any confidentiality, and I believe that Rick Flynn will be attending also.
You second on that? Super. Any discussion on that? Do we need a vote on that, Brian? Yeah, well, can we take a vote? Should I abstain on that?
Reedy,
Yes.
Phillips,
Yes.
Schaffner,
Yes.
Foreman,
Yes.
Cosgray,
Yes.
McCreary.
Yes.
Okay. We have no first reading.
We need another motion
Okay.
to undo the motion because we're creating that.
I'll make a motion that we, reset the motion for all of the unencumbered funds going to the water project.
What was that again?
So all of the carryover, we said we want to put all the carryover to the water project.
Right.
I want to rescind that
Okay.
motion. So I'm making a motion to rescind the motion. So use all the carryover for the water project.
I'll second.
Any discussion on that? All right, if we could get a roll call on that, please, Brian?
Cosgray,
Yes.
Reedy,
Yes.
Foreman, Phillips,
Yes.
Schaffner,
Yes.
and McCreary.
Yes.
Are there any other new motions that would like to be made? No. With that, we'll go into the second reading. Ordinance 20, this is sponsor on Mrs. Reedy, ordinance 24-42, temporary annual appropriations ordinance of the village of Baltimore for 2025.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we would like to, remove this.
To suspend.
The third
Yes.
reading, and I'd like to make a motion to make this.
You have to suspend first.
Here a second. Yes, there you go.
This is so confusing for me.
Me too.
And I'd like to make a motion that.
That, we gotta have a vote on this.
Okay.
Suspending the three reading rule for.
All right, can I get a roll call?
Reedy,
Yeah.
Cosgray,
Yes.
McCreary,
Yes.
Foreman,
Yes.
Phillips,
Yes.
Schaffner.
Yes.
Motion to
Okay, I'd like to now make a motion to adopt the temporary budget for 2025.
Any discussion?
We
on
have
that?
to have a second.
Oh, sorry.
That was a great second.
Yeah.
Now discussion.
Any discussion on that? If not, I'd like to go to a roll call on that as well.
Reedy,
Yes.
Cosgray,
Yes.
McCreary,
Yes.
Foreman,
Yes.
Phillips,
Yes.
and Schaffner.
Yes.
Okay. The next ordinance is, ordinance, Ms. Schaffner is the, sponsor on this, ordinance 24-45, and the ordinance to reappoint Jeffrey Faco to the position of village solicitor for the village of Baltimore, Ohio, for a term of 2 years, and to fix the compensation to be paid to the declaration of an emergency.
You can go 3 readings, right, Jeff?
Well, no.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we need this tonight.
Okay.
So
How did it last week?
I'll go ahead and move to suspend the reading.
Can I get any discussion on that?
Yes, I have a quick comment. I thought we had discussed and brought up amending the salary on that, which is in the contract established at about 62,000. The state average, as I said, and I know he's at will, state average is 87,600. I'm not saying that's where we should land, but I'm proposing that we somehow amend that salary accordingly. So.
Could we put that in the budget? Discussions next meeting.
I'm fine with that.
Is that okay? Okay, but I would like to suspend the 3 readings because I can tell all of you, I need Jeff here. So,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to separate the money from
Okay,
the.
that's fine, that's fine.
Is all I'm trying to do.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm fine.
Okay. Okay, so can I get we have this coach, gotta get a roll call.
Yes, this is a motion to suspend.
Yes.
Okay. Schaffner
Yes.
and Foreman.
Yes.
Phillips,
Yes.
Cosgrave,
Yes.
McCreary,
Yes.
Reedy.
Ordinance 2024-45.
40 seconds.
Good discussion. Thank you all. Can I get a roll call on that?
Schaffner,
Yes.
Foreman,
Yes.
Phillips.
Yes.
Where am I at? Cosgrave.
Yes.
McCreary.
Yes.
Reedy.
Yes.
I get everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we're moving on. We're in the next ordinance is a 3rd reading. Mr. Foreman is the sponsor of this. It's ordinance 24-43. And it's an ordinance amending chapter 240, which is the employee manual, personnel policies and regulations of the Baltimore codified ordinances in order to provide an increase in the annual safety boot allowance.
This is the 3rd reading. Form makes a motion to adopt.
Any discussion on that? Good. Can I get a roll call on that, please, Brian?
Foreman.
Yes.
And McCreary. Cosgrave.
Yes.
Phillips.
Yes.
Reedy.
Yes.
Schaffner.
Yes.
Wonderful. So the tabled ordinances, do I need to read that? And we're leaving them?
Yeah, you can read the title of them and see if council wants.
Okay. Good.
Why was this?
On this tabled one, the first one, we're gonna redo something. He's gonna redo something. So if I
So I
do,
would recommend it can remain tabled.
yeah,
It can remain tabled under council rules for up to a year.
yeah,
Under
no,
normal circumstances.
he's gonna do it quicker than that. I would assume.
Well, I
Yeah,
can't remember when we put it on table. It's 1 year from the time it was tabled, and I think it was last
We got some
summer.
time.
We still got time. We still got time.
Just remember, going Also, the other tabled ordinance is the annexation of the Keller Farm North, and we've all agreed that we're going to see what happens with the township as far as that goes.
Yeah, just an FYI on that, that is one of those exceptions to the normal 1 year rule for tabled ordinances, because the village has until the first council meeting of February to take action on that. And if the council doesn't adopt it, it automatically fails. Okay? Yeah, just an FYI, I'll remind council of that.
And that's, we'll, I feel like we can talk further about that in January, decide what we're gonna do there. So is there any old business, I guess? All right, does anybody have any new business? Is there any visitors that would like to say anything else before we adjourn? Okay, the next meeting will be held the 2nd Monday in January, which is January 13th, 7 p.m. I have a motion to adjourn. Yeah, well, so we are having a staff party Friday for the village employees. I don't know how that works. I mean, anybody would be welcome to come, but we can't have it just for the employees.
Yeah. Typically, my understanding is it's just for the employees, right, Brian?
Well,
The council members can come.
Yeah. I mean, you have enough food budgeted for.
Brian said he would buy whatever else.
Jeff, what do you say?
Jeff, you're.
I wasn't directing that towards you. I'm just saying generally speaking.
Jeff, you're invited.
I know.
If you plan on coming, would you let me know by tomorrow, please?
So
that-
you can.
So we can make an adjustment to the, yeah,
That's what I meant.
yeah.
Not a big
Have a
deal.
good time. I'll be at work.
Yes.
It's not your season.
Friday? Friday. I love it. 7 o'clock. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
I heard Foreman. Who seconded it?
I did. Okay. Do we, can you come?
Everybody say aye.
Everybody say aye. I'm trying to have to buy my.